All right, let's get right into it. I want you to picture the scene. It's just after the resurrection. You've got a few of the disciples on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. A charcoal fire is going, and they've just had breakfast with the risen Jesus. It's right here, in this quiet, really personal moment, that one of the most important conversations in the entire New Testament is about to happen.
So Jesus turns to Simon Peter and asks him a question. And he doesn't just ask it once, he asks it 3 times. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And 3 times Peter says yes. And each time Peter says yes, Jesus gives him a command. Feed my lambs. Then tend my sheep. And finally, feed my sheep. The repetition is it's so deliberate. You have to ask, what is really going on here?
So, what's the deal with the 3 questions? Is this just a personal moment for Peter? A chance to heal the wound of his 3 denials by the fire? Or is this the start of something much, much bigger? Well, the sources we're digging into here argue that this isn't just about forgiveness. No, this is a formal commission, an appointment. According to these sources, this moment on the beach doesn't stand alone. It's actually the final piece of a puzzle. It's built on what they describe as a strong 3-strand braided rope of biblical imagery that all points to a unique office for Peter. So let's do this. Let's unravel that rope, 1 strand at a time. Okay, our first strand is this powerful foundational image of the rock. And to really get it, we have to rewind a little bit to an earlier promise that Jesus made to Peter, a moment that totally sets the stage for everything else. And there it is. Jesus looks at Simon and gives him a new name, Petros, which means rock. And then he says, on this rock, I will build my church. I mean, wow. But what does it actually mean to be the rock? To feel the full weight of this, we've got to look at how this image was used way back in the Old Testament. And what's so fascinating is that when you comb through the Old Testament, the title rock almost always refers to God himself. He is the rock of Israel, the eternal rock, the fortress. So for Jesus, who is understood to be God, to give this divine title to a man, to Peter, well, that's a huge deal. He's entrusting him with a godlike quality of stability and permanence. This brings us to a really key parallel that the sources point out. The prophet Isaiah tells the people of Israel to look back to Abraham, calling him the rock from which you were hewn. Abraham was the human foundation stone of the Old Covenant people. So the argument here is pretty clear. Just as Abraham was the founding rock for ancient Israel, Jesus is now making Peter the new foundational rock for his church. All right, that leads us directly to the second strand in our rope. Because right after calling Peter the rock, Jesus says something else. He says he will give him the keys of the kingdom. Now to us, that might sound a little poetic, but for anyone listening back then, this was not some vague metaphor. It pointed to a very real, very powerful job. See, back in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, there is this prophecy about the king's top official, the royal steward or prime minister. This guy literally held the key to the palace, which was the symbol of the king's own authority. And listen to that language. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. Remember that phrasing. Now look at what Jesus says to Peter. I will give you the keys, whatever you bind, whatever you loose. I mean, the parallel is unmistakable. Jesus, the true king of the new house of David, is appointing his own prime minister. He's handing Peter the keys, a symbol of his own authority to govern. His followers would have understood this loud and clear. And here's the crucial detail our sources emphasize. The role of the royal steward wasn't just a one-time honor for one guy, it was an established, successive office. When one steward died or retired, the keys were passed on to the next. This implies that Jesus was establishing a structure, an office that was meant to last. And that brings us to our third and final strand, which takes us right back where we started, to that breakfast on the beach. Because this is where the foundational role of the rock and the governing authority of the steward are given their ultimate mission. This is the why. Think about it. 3 times Peter denied Jesus, and now 3 times Jesus asks for a declaration of love. The sources see this perfect symmetry not just as a moment of personal healing, but as a solemn, official recommissioning for the job ahead. And pay attention to the specific words Jesus uses. He says, feed my lambs, and then tend my sheep. The argument is that this distinction is really important. It shows that Peter's care is meant to extend over the entire flock, from the newest, most vulnerable members to the most mature ones. It's a universal job.
And the language gets even more specific. When Jesus says, "tend my sheep," the Greek verb he uses is poimaino. Now, that doesn't just mean giving them food. It means to shepherd in the strongest sense of the word, to govern, to rule, to direct, to protect. It's the same kind of word used to describe a king's authority over his people. This is so unbelievably important because, just like the title rock, the title shepherd belonged to God in the Old Testament. And then, in the Gospel of John, Jesus takes that title for himself. He says, "I am the good shepherd." So when he turns to Peter and commands him to shepherd the flock, he's delegating his own personal divine mission. He's literally handing over his job description. Okay, so here's where it all comes together. These three images, the rock, the steward, and the shepherd, they aren't just separate ideas floating around. The sources argue they are designed to interlock perfectly, forming a single cohesive picture of a unique office and mission. Let's just lay it all out. 1. Peter is the rock, the stable, visible foundation. 2. He's the steward, the prime minister who holds the keys of Christ's own authority. And 3. He's the shepherd, the chief pastor responsible for the entire flock. You see how each one reinforces the others? It's one single mandate. Now, of course, a common objection you'll hear is that this whole exchange on the beach was just about restoring Peter personally after his terrible denial. But the rebuttal from the sources is, well, why can't it be both? The argument is that the restoration was absolutely necessary, but it was a restoration for a purpose. He was being restored to a specific job, chief shepherd, a role that you'll notice the other apostles standing right there didn't receive. So, what's the bottom line? Why does any of this matter today? According to the sources, this whole structure, this threefold office given to Peter as rock, steward, and shepherd, wasn't just a temporary fix for the early days. It's understood as the foundation Christ established to ensure his church would remain unified in its beliefs and leadership down through the centuries. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. When we truly understand the incredible Old Testament weight behind these three words, rock, steward, and shepherd, how does that completely change the way we hear that simple, intimate question on the beach? Do you love me?